The 40th meeting in public for the Richmond CCG. Yes, I know. A bit of a landmark, equivalent to the Ruby wedding. Thank you. I'm chairing today in Graham's absence. He's not available. We've also had apologies from Nicola and also from Catherine Yates, which we can record. This is a governing body which is a meeting in public. In relation to questions from members of the public, the CCG is committed to openness and transparency and therefore wishes to conduct as much of its business as possible in a session that the public can attend and observe. Although the meeting is held in public, it is not a public meeting. This means there is no opportunity for the public to ask questions apart from that offered at my discretion as chair. There is a specific slot at the end of the agenda where the public can ask questions. The governing body meeting is also being video recorded as part of the commitment to make information as accessible as possible. The video will be put on the website within a few days of the meeting. The CCG does not allow for any other recording of governing body unless agreed by the chair prior to the meeting. There is a protocol for how the CCG conducts its meetings, and that is available on the CCG website. Before we start the formal proceedings, I would just like to record the sad passing of John Thompson, who was the head of Health Watch here in Richmond and a member of this board. He died suddenly recently, and John, as many of you will know, was very actively involved in voluntary services around Richmond for about 30 years, former member of the PCT board, I think, for 8 years, and I think we pass our sympathies and thoughts to his family over his sudden loss. Sadly, we haven't had a notification yet of the replacement on this board from Health Watch. We just wait for that to come in due course. But yes, our fond memories of John, who made a great contribution. Are there any declarations of interest which are different to anybody's previously recorded or currently recorded declarations of interest in the register? No, none. So we'll take the declarations of interest as accurate in the register. Minutes of the last meeting of the 5th of March. So these are, as you can see, very copious. I don't intend to go through this line by line, as you will be relieved to know, but everybody's had an opportunity to read these minutes. Has anybody got any comments on completeness and accuracy that would like to say? Anna.
Can I just add that I was in attendance at the meeting on behalf of Shannon last time?
Yes, we make sure that that is accurately reflected, please. So if we are happy to accept those as an accurate record of the minutes of the meetings, can we move on to the action plan and the action log? And there's 3 items on here, 2 of which are actually overdue. So we've got one here, Liz, and thank you for being here today. We've got one on safeguarding children in the annual report. Are you able to give us any update on this? It agreed to feedback onto the interim Children's Director of Services on the governing body's concerns regarding the process of monitoring homeschool children. So it was all about her. And of course, this has been very prevalent in the lay press and national press lately.
I did feed it back to the Children's Trust Board. There's been quite a lot of change in the Children's Trust Board. What they've actually done with it or about it to progress, or I'm not sure, so I can follow that up. But I certainly raised it up from this board.
Yeah, well, given that this has raised itself up the national agenda in people's awareness, I think it would be helpful to get a formal response.
Yeah, because they've got an interim director of children's now.
That's right, that's what I understand. Yeah.
So there's been quite a lot of change, but I'll follow it up again at the board in terms of what they've done about it.
Great, thank you very much. The second one here was Fergus on the emergency preparedness and resilience response.
Thank you, Chair. This one can be closed now. When we've conducted the annual assurance process around November, December of this year, later this year, then we will take it through the Audit Committee. And the Chair of the Audit Committee for both Kingston and Richmond is happy to be identified as my lay member, executive lead. No further action required on that, and I'll bring it back through at the end of this year for the governing body when it's prepared.
Thank you. And the last one, which is on track, regarding public question time, Joe.
Yes, that was emailed
It
through.
was emailed through, was it? So that one is complete. Thank you. So we can record now the items taken in private on the 5th of March. You'll see the 3 items listed here on the agenda. One, the risk share agreement between Kingston and Richmond CCGs, the Moving Forward Together programme, and the Kingston Richmond Local Delivery Unit senior management structure. So those were the 3 items that we took in private and are noted. So let's move on to the Accountable Officer's report. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to update you briefly on an event that happened last week. We had a clinically led conference for South West London, and I'm sure some of the members here attended. It was attended by over 300 clinicians and professionals from across South West London, led by our clinical leads for South West London, which is Dr. Andrew Murray, who's the Merton Chair, and Jane Wilson, who's the Medical Director at Kingston Hospital. It was a really exciting event where they were setting the priorities for South West London clinically and professionally led. And what we will be doing, the output of that will be taken to the Clinical Senate over the next few months, and that will be fed into our long-term plan for South West London, and will inform local plans as well as the South West London plan. But it was a really good event, quite energetic. Everyone told me how engaged they'd been in the day. We all went to the Oval, actually, and the cricket was on as well, which was very nice. But it was a really good day, and really well attended, with a lot of energy in the room. So we will get you a report back from that at some point in the future with some of the priorities and the work that's gone on in that. And thank you to anyone that attended, because it was a very good day.
Managing Director's report. Tonya. Do you want this one?
Thank you, Chair. Is that working? It is now, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a few items for me this time. Next week is Mental Health Awareness Week 2019, and that will take place between next Monday and next week. And the theme for this year is body image, how we think and feel about our bodies. The CCG is planning a series of activities which are summarised within the report, and some of those will continue after the week has finished. I'd also like to congratulate Hounslow and Richmond Community Health Trust for their nomination for a number of awards and the Patient Safety HSJ Awards. That's really great, and that's the Teddington Memorial Hospital Inpatient Ward and the Always Events team who are finalists for this year. So we wish them luck, and the judging will take place in May, and we should know whether they have been successful in July. Then moving us on, the NHS app is an easy and secure way to access a range of NHS services on smartphone or tablet. That's currently being rolled out with the ambition that all practices in England will have been connected to the app by July this year. Patients can now download the free NHS app, but it can only be used for the core functions once the practices have been connected to it. So we're working with the Richmond practice to make sure they're connected by the deadline. And then finally, just to thank Healthwatch Richmond, who have produced a booklet following the requests from local people that is an easy read guide on their doorstep, providing them with information on a wide variety of health and social care services available across the borough. If anyone hasn't seen the booklet, we've got copies of it in the CCG, happy to share, but it's been very well received, and thanks to Healthwatch for producing it. That's all I have to say this time. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Tonya? No. Thank you. Very clear. Thank you very much. Paul, the Audit Committee Chair's report.
A few points to go through this morning. So, first of all, in the recent meeting with Richmond CCG for audit. We looked at the local counter-fraud services, so the work plan for the year ahead was approved. But just again, this was an issue that came up. We have a self-review tool with the LCFS, and we actually ended up with a rather perverse outcome. Because we've had no fraud, we are red rated in our ability to demonstrate we can effectively deal with fraud. So it's a slight anomaly, and it's a request that we've made to make sure when it goes into the annual report, it is very clear and obvious why. If you look at it very quickly, you might think it's red rated, something's happened. Actually, it's the complete opposite. So that note was made. With regards to the internal audit progress, 4 reports were brought to committee, and the following assurances were given place. So commissioning, we had reasonable assurance. For PC delegated commissioning, we had substantial assurance. And then for conflicts of interest and the business framework, we had reasonable assurance as well. So I think from an audit perspective, that is a fairly good set of outcomes that we can take comfort in. The internal audit plan, again, for the year ahead, had been approved previously at the South West London Committees in Common, which was held at the end of March. And we took that plan to Richmond for the local agreement, and that was approved. And we agreed that that would be reviewed periodically going forward throughout the year. So coming then towards the year-end requirements. So first of all, it's important to get the head of internal audit opinion, and the statement that will go into the accounts this year. It says the organisation has an adequate and effective framework for risk management, governance and internal control. However, our work has identified further enhancements to the framework of risk management, governance and internal control to ensure that it remains adequate and effective. So some actions there. Nothing I don't think that we should be too concerned with, but some activities need to be done to improve that further. But I would also caveat that that is a very similar outcome for most CCGs in the South West London region and across London as a whole. So again, nothing to be concerned about there. And then I think the final point is the annual accounts audit is underway with the external auditors. We have a deadline for the 28th of May, 29th of May. We have to sign and approve these on the 23rd of May. And as everybody's aware, Richmond CCG has reported a deficit again. And Bob, you'll have to tell me the exact figure, but it's 5 million, 4.9 million, which is as we...
3.9.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Which is as we forecasted. So there's been no sort of deviation, but we still have to report the overspend to the Secretary of State, and that will be a process we have to go through with the auditors over the next few weeks. But I think in all other aspects, we recorded an underspend on running costs, remuneration sections consistent across the piece. I think that is probably as much as I can say, and obviously, as I say, the audit is underway. Nothing untoward has so far been identified, and we are expecting, subject to the qualification on the deficit position, we're expecting a clean set of accounts. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul, the audit report? No? Thank you very much indeed. Sarah, would you like to take us through the Health and Care Partnership news?
So I wasn't going to talk about this in detail. I was going to take it that everyone has read this. This is the regular update from the Health and Care Partnership. But I was just going to highlight one area, which was Jobs That Care, because I just thought this was quite an exciting thing for South West London. So what we've decided to do across South West London, working with all the directors of HR within the provider organisations as well as our workforce leads for South West London, is to think about how we encourage young people across South West London to get engaged with health and care roles, which are numerous, not just clinical roles but non-clinical roles, and working in social care and other areas. And they have got a play that they take out to schools, and they've already spoken to over 20 schools across South West London, but also they've got a board game called, is it Jobs That Care? Yeah. And it's a fantastic board game, and just so you know, we have got copyright on that, and I hope to sell it across the land. And the money will, if we do sell it, will come back into South West London to be used in workforce and training and to support people going forwards. But we've not really had anything like this for quite some time, because workforce hasn't been something that's been taken at scale and taken forward. So I think it's a really positive step forward for South West London, and something that I think we want to encourage and move forwards as we go through. And this is the kind of thing we should be doing together to kind of to encourage people to become engaged with both health and social care going forwards. So I thought I would just highlight that one for people. And if you ever get the chance to have a go at the game, because I know some of the, I don't know if you did at the PPI, yeah, the South West London PPI leads, when they came together, actually played it, is my understanding. Yeah. Hope so. All proceeds going to a really good cause.
Very good. Any questions for Sarah on the South West London status? No? No, thank you. In that case, can we move on to the Richmond Health and Care Plan update? So, Julia, are you leading on this? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased this morning to present to the governing body the discussion document, which has we've pulled together as a whole range of stakeholders, and a big thank you to everyone who has participated in this, particularly community and voluntary groups, local people, and of course officers from the various provider and commissioning organisations across Richmond. The discussion document has now been produced and is now out for the next phase of engagement with regards to discussing the actions that have underpinned the priorities of the plan and the way in which we are going to be measuring success. As the committee will recall, the plan describes the local vision, priorities and actions to meet the health and care needs of the local population and deliver improvements. It's not the totality of everything that we are doing as partners and providers and commissioners and community and voluntary sector across Richmond, but are those areas where together, collectively, we believe we will make the biggest impact by working together. And we've just, coming to this committee is to really be part of the next phase of comms of engagement, which is going to be undertaken in May and June. As you will recall, the plan talks about, looks across the life cycle of start well, live well and age well. And for each of those areas, we've identified three priorities, which we consider to be important to improving health and care for local people. There are also two cross-cutting priority areas. One is prevention, and you will see that prevention is throughout all the areas, and also carers, as we consider carers to be a key group of individuals that we mustn't lose sight of in terms of supporting them in the care that they do. As I said, the next stage of communications and engagement is to be undertaken during this month and next month. And within the discussion document, you'll see towards the end, there are 4 questions that we're asking of local people, stakeholders and others with regards to actually, is there an understanding of what we'll be focusing on in the next 2 years? Is there agreement in terms of the actions we're proposing to take, which will improve the health and care of local people? Is there anything obviously missing, recognising, so there are other pieces of work that we're also undertaking and other programmes and other strategies that officers and members of the public and local community groups are undertaking? And are there any other comments that you would like to add about the health and care discussion document? Once we've completed the communications and engagement, we'll then be looking at how we formally implement and deliver this plan, and there are a number of existing forums and groups that already exist which will take on responsibility for taking this work forward, as well as needing to look to set up maybe specific groups to work on particular areas. I'll go through the document in a second, but as you will see, Appendix 2 in your papers outlines the next stage in terms of the engagement overview. It shows there is a governance pathway, so there's an expectation that all partners within health and care providers take this this discussion paper to each of their relevant boards for discussion and endorsement. Each partner will also take forward and have discussions within their own organisations with their work, with their staff and others, their boards, with regard to the discussion document. And then we are working with Health Watch and a whole range of other community and voluntary groups with regards to doing some targeted engagement with service users on what we are proposing to undertake in terms of actions and how we're going to do that and what the impact is. So that's just an overview in terms of the report. So in terms of the discussion document itself, as I said, it's been pulled together by a whole range of stakeholders and is about our vision, priorities and actions to meet the health and care of local people. And those that will support delivery of improvements to care. In the discussion document, we've identified our vision and also very clearly put up front that we will be focusing on prevention and early intervention, supporting people to be involved in their own care, integrating and making care person-centred, supporting independence for as long as possible. And I hope that those themes are visible throughout the report, throughout the discussion document, Previously, as shared, the discussion document has been pulled together with discussions with local people, as well as what we know about the local state of our health and care, the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, and I'm not going to run into that. What is important is, if I flick you through to slide 14, which again, as in the covering sheet, outlines those priorities for action. Then within the rest of the document, what you will have for each of those priorities areas are the suggested and proposed actions we'll be undertaking. So if we look at slide 21, where we're looking at improving the mental well-being and resilience of children and young people, you'll see we've got 4 key actions that we're looking in terms of undertaking locally here in Richmond. There's the focus on the under 5s mental health needs assessment to inform development of services. There's the rollout of the emotional wellbeing programme in all our schools. We're part of the Trailblazer work that's been part of the South West London programme. We're also looking at how we establish a digital youth project steering group, which actually expand the range of resources and tools to support emotional wellbeing and support resilience. And also we're reviewing our current neurodevelopmental and assessment offer for 0 to 5-year-olds, because we know that's an area where actually we are doing less well, and we do know that also early intervention and prevention are where we need to be focusing a lot of our energy and effort. So throughout the document, what you will see is the priorities, the actions, and then the impact. And for that particular list of actions and priorities, by doing this, we will ensure that children and young families receive targeted support to prevent development of serious difficulties, that children and young people have timely access to support 7 days a week, very much partly through a digital offer. We will also ensure that children and young people receive support so that incidents of self-harm are reduced, and also that neurodevelopment assessment referrals are always conducted within 12 weeks, because we know there are extensive waiting times. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through every action and every impact. What we have produced is our plan on a page. So, and for each of the priorities and each of the actions, we have identified what the actions are and what the impact are. And this is what we're going to be using for a lot of the engagements. That is available for everyone to have, and it's an easy read version of the 53-page plan, and there is a shorter discussion document. So, as I said, we are currently out to communications and engagement, sense checking on the plan. Very much welcome feedback from the governing body with regards to the shaping of the plan so far, whether there are any particular gaps, whether there are any things you'd like to add in, or you need more information on. I think I'll leave it there and then take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Questions for Julia? Yes, Liz.
Not a question, actually, just really well done, Julia and colleagues who've put this plan together, because I know it's not always been easy to get everybody's views and ideas on that. And that really successful event we had, Health and Care Engagement event, I think it's really shaping up great. And I do think that a big well done should be recorded on the minutes. I know that elected members have some comments to feedback, which they will do during this next round. And I think the local authority really welcomes the fact that this paper will go through its own governance as well. The only thing that I would say, and again, this is a further refined version, so I may not be up to date, and I'll look again at this, is that the visuals, which I think are lovely, should not infer an NHS. It needs to infer a partnership and a balance, that's all I would say. Although I think the visuals really add to it. But thank you very much indeed, personally, for doing all this work and the leadership of the plan, because I think that the product is really looking good.
Yes, Susan.
Thank you. Yes, I was also going to want to thank everybody for who has been involved in the plan. I think with the engagement particularly has been very effective, and I want to commend everybody who was involved in that, CCG and partners. I know we've managed to reach what we call hard-to-reach groups in this, and also managed to bring in new people in the population who've now got starting to get involved in our planning and for health and social care, so that was excellent. I really like the way that the plan, it is very clear and it's very evidence-based. It does link very clearly into what are the particular issues around our borough and how we're dealing with those issues, which is particularly clear. And I realise this is a draft and we've got a lot more engagement to come, but I would just say I really like the way we also show the outcomes. You know, by doing this, we will achieve A, B, C. There are one or two areas where I would hope they could be tightened up just a little bit. But otherwise, so I hope to see that when this comes back to governing body, but otherwise really impressed, and thanks to all the hard work on the engagement.
Thank you, Susan. Any other comments? Julia? No? Well, Julia, thank you very much indeed, and we look forward to the next version. Special education needs and disability paper. Is this you again, Julia, or is Doreen joining us? No.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is coming to the governing body for approval but also for noting and approval. As you are aware, under the Children and Families Act 2014, there were certain statutory responsibilities conferred on clinical commissioning groups with regard to the delivery of services for children with special educational needs and disabilities, also called in this paper SEND. And this paper outlines for the governing body the statutory responsibilities of the governing body. And the reason it's coming to the governing body today is because you will be aware that there was an inspection in September 18 in Kingston, at which there were a number of concerns raised with regards to the CCG in Kingston's adherence and conferring to the statutory responsibilities. And as we share a provider in common in terms of Achieving for Children, who are partners in delivery of services for children with special educational needs, we felt it was very important that we actually shared some of the learning and actually raised awareness within the governing body with regards to our statutory responsibilities as a governing body for this very important group of children and young people. We don't know whether or not when we are going to have an inspection by CQC in Ofsted, but we are one of the few local authorities and one of the few areas within London who still haven't had their inspection against the 2014 Families Act, so it is highly likely that there will be one shortly. So as the paper outlines for everyone, it outlines what the reforms were in 2014, and it was linked around, I'm now on page 3 of the report, links to a single assessment process that's fully coordinated, and actually the importance of education, health and care plans, which also extended the age from 0 to 18 to 0 to 25. It also requires local services with the Council and the CCG to be very clear and transparent about what our local offer of services are to this group of children and young people. And it also outlines the importance of looking at preparation for adulthood for those with learning difficulty assessments that's different to people with learning disabilities. So in terms of the requirements for the CCG, as a governing body, we're actually required to have identified elected members providing strategic leadership for integrated work across healthcare and education with regards to this important group of children. We need to be overseeing and have ways in which we oversee the education, health and care assessments and plans with the appropriate sign-off where required, and also be working together with local authority leads with regards to looking at the service provision that is provided for children with special educational needs and disabilities. There's a section 1.3 talks about the inspection, and normally we're given 5 days notice in terms of them coming, and that leads to a lot of activity. In terms of learning from the Kingston inspection, what was identified was that as a governing body in Kingston, that we didn't have the strategic leadership and monitoring of the work at the CCGs in the CCG with regards to implementing the 2014 reforms. And therefore it's important as the governing body here in Richmond that equally we ensure that we are actually have that strategic leadership and are monitoring what's happening with this important group of children. There are also particular issues with regards to the quality and monitoring of education, health and care plans, and that's where therapists, care workers, special educational SENCOs in schools come together to actually work with families and children and young people to develop the right educational health and care plan that's going to support them through their learning. And one of the other areas which I know is also a bit of a challenge here in Richmond is the relationship between parents' representatives and those of us who are providing and commissioning services. We attach for information Appendix 2 the details of the health improvements that were listed by CQC for Kingston, and we're using that very much to ensure that we are compliant with what we need to be doing in terms of Richmond. One of the other important areas is also having a designated medical officer and a designated clinical officer. Those two posts, though non-statutory, are key for the interface between all the different health and care professionals, and particularly in terms of representing the health voice and working very closely with those providing and delivering services. We've recently had a resignation of the designated medical officer, but we're working with HRCH, who employ the community paediatricians in terms of their recruitment. And I'm pleased to say that there were successful interviews last week, so we have secured a designated clinical officer, but in the meantime we have an interim designated clinical officer working to take forward the programme of work that we need to as a CCG, and we are doing that across both Kingston and Richmond. So we're ensuring that we are fit for purpose, we're delivering our statutory responsibilities. And the important thing for us as a governing body is that we've got governing body executive leadership and named individuals, and that one of the things we've done in Kingston is we have the CCG statement of intent in terms of our commitment to the commissioning and delivery of high quality health services for children and young people and for parents and carers for children with special educational needs and disabilities that result in improved outcomes and life chances. There is also work that we're doing in terms of joint commissioning, and there are plans again to establish a joint commissioning group across Kingston, Richmond, and that is in the process of being established. At the same time, we have James Thomas, who is the new Interim Director for Children's Services, has with the CCG established a Richmond SEND Partnership Board, and the first meeting was in March, and we're looking at formulating that work plan. So again, collectively, we're discharging our responsibilities in terms of this important group of children and young people. And there are 2 programmes of work that underpin that. There's a transformational plan which is focused on SEND, but also we have the children and adolescent mental health plan, which equally is important and links into that piece of work. So in terms of next steps, and for noting and discussion by the board, as part of the work that we're doing, we're working with Achieving for Children and the local council with regards to what is our action plan in terms of this important group of children and young people. And one of the things we're doing is there is a self-assessment tool that we are completing, and we're in the process of that. That's at the end of being completed now. And there is another partnership board in May. And we will continue to bring regular reports to the governing body as well as to the Integrated Quality Governance Committee of the CCG, which is a joint committee which will have monthly oversight of how we are making SEND improvements. I think that's all I was wanting to say. Sorry if it feels a little bit discombobulated, but I expected Doreen, my expert, to be here today. I don't know if there are any questions or points of clarity from the board. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Liz.
Thank you, Julia. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to make sure are recorded in the minutes. The local authority chief exec and directors at board level have had very significant concerns about the commitment and the seriousness which the CCG takes the education, care and health plans and the SEN statutory duties. So we really welcome this paper. Thank you for it. And I know at the AFC board, where I'm a council director on that board, it's also been flagged the significant concerns about the commitment from the CCG. So again, we really welcome this paper and working forwards together and using the learning from Kingston also. I think the only other thing I wanted to flag was in the discussions we've had around the letter and slides from Sarah moving forward together, the discussion we've had is that is an area, SEN, and the statutory role of the CCG, and how might any form of merger affect that role, and would it be diluted or dissipated at all?
So the accountable officer responsibility remains the same, and I'm already the accountable officer across 5 CCGs, so it won't dilute that. It will be exactly the same. And my expectation would be this would be one of the areas where locally you would want to set up the right infrastructure and could actually help that. So you could have the delegated responsibility together and support that in a way that makes sense that we don't currently do. So there's an opportunity there, I think. So I think the answer is no, it won't be diluted. In fact, it could be strengthened through that process, and we just need to make sure it is. I think this is quite new for CCGs around the SEND. I remember because when I was in Bexley in South East London, we were one of the first wave that were inspected on this, and it was very new to us around making sure that we had the right things in place as the NHS around this and making sure that we met the requirements. I think what I would say is that Richmond's taking this very seriously, and I think it's an important piece of work for us. So anything we can do together to strengthen it, I think we would welcome.
Any further comments? Yes, Tonya.
Yeah, just to reiterate everything that's been said, I think we do sit, I personally sit on both SEND transformation boards, and we do try and get, we have got quite a senior presence in that. But as Sarah said, I think it's quite new for us, and it's not an area that we traditionally have huge amounts of expertise and experience and within our CCG. So working with partners to actually understand what we need to do and achieve in partnership, and particularly around some of the provisions such as therapies is an area that comes off quite a lot. And actually, how do we work together, not just in terms of making sure that we've got the right resource, but we've got the right model in place for therapies that promote independence and move away from some of the intensive clinical therapy support that we've had in place previously, but more into a supportive and coaching kind of offer. So I think it's working. For me, the strength of this SEND piece is the partnership working, and actually everyone having the transparency, openness and working and moving forward together. So, but we have got a good opportunity in Richmond to learn from the improvements we've already made actually in Kingston. I'm pleased to say the Kingston Transformation Recovery Plan was well received by Ofsted.
Good. Yes, Anna.
Thanks, Chair. The only thing I wanted to add is both from the CCGs and Children's Services, actually across both Richmond and Wandsworth, they have flagged up that the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which is obviously a partnership document, doesn't pick out SEND possibly clearly enough, and it's not as transparent as it could be, even though there might be a couple of points, and rather than see it as an add-on. So it's something that we are looking at with the JSNA redeveloping for next year, that we can pull it out a bit more clearly to help with that.
Well, that'll be helpful. Thank you. Yes, Sarah.
I'll ask a question on that. So is there seen as a specific SEND need in Richmond and Wandsworth that's different to elsewhere? Or I just wondered if it was being asked to be pulled out in the JSNA, what was that an evidence base around what we're showing as being a problem or an issue significantly?
No, not so much. It was more that through the SEND, the Ofsted reviews, is that the JSNA needs to be seen as one of the documents that evidences the needs for SEND children. And I think it's not so much as a higher need, it's just it might only be, say, maybe one bullet point in there. And I think from a inspection point of view, it's not seen as possibly sufficient. So that's something that came out of the Kingston reviews and something we're looking at across Richmond as well. So it's more just having it a bit more explicit and maybe a bit more detailed than it currently is.
I'm assuming then what the JSNA will bring out is that there may not be a specific need that is more than anywhere else. Is that what you're saying? But you just need to be really clear in the JSNA of that. Okay.
Any other comments or questions for Julia? No. So, Julia, you're asking for approval for this. Is that's just approval for the report? Because you're planning to bring back to the July meeting the final version of this. Is that correct?
Yes, so partners are pulling together an action plan which will demonstrate that as a system we are meeting or the actions that we need to be delivering SEND against the inspection framework.
We're seeking approval for the report so that
Yes.
we can prepare the final
Yes.
final report.
Yes, please.
Is everybody happy to approve what we have before us? Yes? Indeed. Thank you very much, Julia. Integrated Quality Governance Committees in Common Report. So, Fergus, that sounds like one for you.
Thank you, Chair. So this now familiar format, I think, of the performance report and feedback from the Integrated Quality Governance Committees is here for the committee to discuss as required and to note. It's pretty much our year-end position now. I think we've got most of our data is up to March, but there are still a couple of areas which cover the February period, and they will follow through as and when those figures are available. Given what a busy year we had within the NHS, I think overall our performance figures on page 5 are pretty positive. There are a couple of areas that we have talked about periodically over the previous year in terms of mixed-sex accommodation breaches, for example, or our A&E performance. So I think pretty much where we're at in that chart will be our year-end position. It won't change too much between now and then. I would want to highlight to the committee the change in our performance with regards to our referral to treatment target performance, which has slipped a little bit in the last couple of months. A fair proportion of this is down to the fact that St George's Hospital is now back in a position to be able to report its performance. And obviously that's having a wider impact in each of the CCGs, where for a period we weren't able to identify what that performance was. Now that that has come back in, it has dropped our performance for the year to date to just below the required standard. I'm pleased to report that Kingston Hospital and Chelsea and Westminster, which are two of our big providers, are performing well against that standard. In terms of cancer standards, we have achieved the vast majority of the 9 cancer standards in one particular area, which is the 31-day cancer surgery target. A small number of patients over a very broad number of pathways where the performance has not been as we would expect in the most recent period. In a positive note, just want to highlight again through the January-February period, which is very busy around delayed transfers of care, I'm really pleased to see the sustained improvement in performance that we're experiencing, particularly around local authority delays. This supports the patient flow within our acute providers, but also make sure that people are returned to the community, whatever their place of setting for their onward care is, happens in a timely way. In terms of our operating plan, supporting activity, we've talked about this, I think, a couple of times previously at the governing body. Continue to see some of the overperformance that we have previously reported, particularly around cancer weights. Moving on then, and just looking at the quality premium dashboard, again, an area that I was concerned about at the beginning of the year, which I'm really pleased our year-end position is now showing as green as our continuing healthcare performance, both in terms of timeliness of assessment and location of assessment. We perform particularly well in that area, not just within within Richmond, but also within Kingston and in comparison to the rest of South West London, we do pretty well. We had 2 integrated quality governance committees since this report was prepared back in March and April. So I'm just highlighting then towards the end of the report for Kingston Hospital Foundation Trust, pleased to say that we've given them some feedback in respect of their annual quality report. Similarly for the Mental Health Trust, we've completed that. In terms of the community provision, I think it's already been mentioned, some really pleasing news about some patient safety awards that Hounslow and Richmond Community Healthcare Trust have been put forward for. In terms of the Mental Health Trust, just to mention, inpatient capacity has been a challenge over the last couple of months. We talked about it at their most recent Clinical Quality Review Group meeting. It is something that they're very much cited on, but it has been a bit of a challenge in the system recently. And then finally, at the end of the report, I highlight some performance around our Learning Disability Mortality Review Programme. And again, I'm pleased to say Richmond is green in terms of the 2 targets that we have, both in terms of attribution, allocation, and the completion of those reviews. And at the back of the report is the wider South West London piece for people's information, just to see how we compare to other parts of South West London. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Fergus. Questions for Fergus? Anyone? It's very comprehensive. It's a very comprehensive report. No? Thank you. No questions? Then we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance Committee. James? Or is it Neil?
Okay. So the Finance Committee reviewed the finance report and the planning items, which we've also got on the agenda, and I'll cover those in the discussion. We also reviewed the BAF, and we've agreed to, for Richmond, separate out 2 of the financial risks around QIP into delivery of identified QIP and the identification of the remaining balance. That was an adjustment we made in the position. I think those were the main aspects we talked about in the Finance Committee. Do you want to go on to the report? Fine. Okay. So as I say, these were the... So the next report is the month 12 position. This is based on the accounts, the draft accounts we've submitted. As Paul has mentioned, the Audit Committee will approve the accounts once we've had our external audit at the end of the month. The headline is we've reported a year-end deficit of 3.9 million. The QIP performance we've reported as achieving 2.9 million higher on our identified QIP, but however we had that gap of unidentified QIP which meant we under-delivered by 4 million on that element. The other thing we factored into the position is because we've built in a lot of non-recurrent benefit, our real underlying position we're reporting at this point shows us having a deficit of 5.2 million. That's the difference between the amount of allocation we get and the costs of the services that we currently have. That's slightly worse than our 17-18 position where we had an underlying position of 4.7 million. The rest of the report just highlights where the spend has moved. It highlights the overspend which we've previously reported on Kingston Hospital. I'm pleased to say the Chelsea and Westminster overspend largely reduced, and we ended up accounting for an overspend on that contract of 300k. The other thing to highlight was just at the year end we had in the last quarter quite an increase on mental health placements, and we've ended up in that area with an overspend of just over 800,000 in mental health placements. And the other thing we've highlighted in the report is the real progress that the CCG's made on managing the CHC pressure. The CHC actual spend this year is just over 4.7% less than the actual spend we had in the previous year. So some real progress has been made on managing that aspect. And then moving on to the planning paper, we agreed a set of budgets in our March meeting. Subsequently, we've been progressing, agreeing various contracts, and also we fed into the plan the bottom-up costs of our mental health investments, which is slightly higher than the assumption we'd made about delivering to the mental health investment standard. The outcome of that is our QIP position requires us to deliver in year 13.1 million of QIP, which is the overall financial gap. And I can report that we've currently identified most of the QIP. We still have a £4.9 million worth of unidentified QIP, and the schedule at the back of the report just shows you the risks that we've applied to the identified QIP. So we've submitted our plan on the basis that we see that there's still a risk around 6.6 million of delivering our overall financial position. We are doing some further work to resolve the full identified QIP, and we have submitted a draft financial recovery plan, and we will do some further work with NHSE in order to submit a final plan by the end of June. Thank you.
Very good, Neil. Thank you. Questions for Neil on finance? We've had a canter through there, but this is the end of the year reporting, so it's appropriate to be really getting focused on closing out that and moving on to the new year. Yes, Sarah.
So all I was going to say is that last year we did improve on the previous year. I think that's really important. I mean, it's still a deficit position. It's not where we want to be, but we improved the position from, you know, we were going down, we kind of plateaued out and then improved the position. So my thinking for next year is we have to improve the position again, and we know that. So I think we have to try and get to the balanced position in Richmond, you know, to the control total that we've been set for Richmond. So, and I think that's where we are with our planning, that we've got a significant risk, but we ought to be able to push that to achieve. And I recognise how challenging that is, but, you know, there's improvement in 1 year and we should continue to improve, in my view.
Any other questions? Fergus, you've got your light on, but you're signalling. No. Okay. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you, Neil, and we'll carry on the good work on. Indeed, I did notice, yeah. So can we take as approval for the financial plan going forward, as Neil has requested? Yes, everybody's nodding. Yeah. That's approved. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Let us move on then to moving forward together. Sarah, this is one for you.
Yeah, so I will take you through this presentation from the start. So, and I know that the governing body have already had some discussions about this as set out in the notes from part 2 at the previous meeting. So there's a number of things going on at the moment, as we are aware. There is the development of primary care networks at kind of locality level. There is a real strengthening of local partnerships at borough level, and the development of, for us, 6 health and care plans, which we talked about earlier, that Julia talked us through. There is a move in the NHS away from the commissioning provider split to think more as a whole system about how do we deliver rather than commissioner provider. And there is an expectation in the long-term plan for the NHS that there will be a number of things that will impact on us, one being a 20% reduction in management costs for all CCGs, and the other the expectation that we will look to have larger CCGs at STP level, but with a lot of delegation to the local. So that what we actually do is we remove the kind of commissioner provider split as much as possible at a local level and have more of a strategic focus from a CCG at South West London level. So it gives us an opportunity to change the way in which we are working, but it's also vitally important for us in South West London that we work on this together and that we are at the very beginning of a process. So what are we doing? So we are considering merging the 6 CCGs for South West London. It is right at the beginning of the process, and we're going to engage with everyone as we start to move forward. So there is a formal process that we have to move through, and there was new guidance that came out on that about a couple of weeks ago, which is in the public domain and which we can send around to everyone. But we will need to get through a process with our regulators and our membership, so our GP membership, which is key going forward. And what we've done in South West London is we have set up a group of all 6 CCG chairs and my senior management team, where we're treating it as a kind of programme management approach, and we're working together to say what do we want at South West London, and what do we want locally, and what do our partners want locally, so that we can think about how we work with a real bottom-up approach, as we have done in South West London for some time. So talking about our approach, well, we have said, as a CCG, that clinical leadership is at the heart of what we do, and therefore, from our perspective, any clinical leadership will need to be at least retained, but enhanced through this process. And always remembering that the patient and the population need to be key to everything that we do. We want to make sure there is local accountability in what we do, so we want to work as a financial delegation to local, even if we do something at South West London. And we are engaging, we started the engagement with our GP members, just with some small discussions with them so far. I have met with the local medical committees from Surrey and Sussex and London, and we're starting to talk to local authorities, and I've written out to the local authorities and to our provider chief execs to say that we are starting this process and we want to engage with them. Health Watch we're also engaging with. We'll obviously need to see how we do that locally in Richmond. We're thinking about our case for change. We did have a case for change, but having spoken to the local medical committees, we are now updating that. So we hope to have that updated, and we will bring that back to you for review. The national guidance, as I said, is now out, and it sets out very clearly what we need to do. Originally, when we first started this process, we thought we would have to have an application in by July, but the new process nationally means that we don't actually have to get an application in until September, which gives us a little bit more time for engagement, which is really positive. So we're going to put in place a programme, and we're trying to build a bottom-up approach focused on our local populations and our partners. So we've created this programme. It's led by the chairs, as I've said. We've got a programme structure because we're required to do that, but because we've done that anyway, because we think it's the right thing to do. And we are making sure the place-based development is led locally. So what we're not doing from a South West London level is saying, here's a model, you've got to do it. What we're saying is, there are many different options. How would you like to work locally? And can we try and build that in for South West London so that it's a real bottom-up process? And now that we are engaging on our health and care plans, we think that this is the right timing to engage and talk to people about how do we then deliver that locally and take accountability locally. There's guiding principles in here which I won't talk you through, but you can see where the senior team are coming from. And I think a key around this is actually we don't want this to be destructive in its process. We want to make sure that we continue to focus on the work that we have to do, but also that we take people with us and that we keep this with a future in mind, because this is the direction for the NHS nationally, and we have a real opportunity in South West London to kind of move this forward, but in a way in which we want to, and we take control of that. So we've got a 3-step process for developing our place delegation, because we want to do this bottom up. So first of all, local systems are being asked to say what is it that they would like to have at a local level, and then we're going to come together across South West London and say, if we pull all 6 of those together, does it make sense for South West London? And if it doesn't, could we negotiate so that we can get it into something that we can deliver? But we want it to be locally owned and led. You've got a lovely picture of the South West London Health and Care Partnership, which I hope you will recognise, but kind of puts the whole system in there, because we work not only, particularly in the NHS, at a local level, we do work at South West London level, but also wider than that. When we consider somewhere like St George's Hospital, over 50% of what they do comes from outside of us as CCGs, and what we want to do is make sure we work with our partners both in NHS England, but also in South East London and out into Surrey, to make sure that the whole system works as best that it can. So what are we going to do now? So we are going to engage on this as we move forwards. We are taking feedback, so we are bringing new kind of information all the time to partners and to others. Governing bodies will continue to lead the process, and we will make sure we bring regular updates, but recognising we don't have governing bodies that often, we will need to work through our kind of committee structures and with our membership. Recognising that we will need to have something in by the end of September as an application if we want to implement by April 2020, which is what we've made the commitment to do. Now, just to let you know what else is happening across London so you can get an idea, South East London are also working to this timetable, and originally North London weren't, but now both North East London and North West London are working to the same timetable. Because the application process has gone back, they've also decided to move. So the only part of London that isn't putting forward this similar process at the moment is North Central, because they think they need the extra year and are planning to go 2021. So that's the kind of that's where we are in that kind of system of process. So I'm just going to pause there.
Questions for Sarah? Thank you for taking us through that. Yes, Liz.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Sarah, from the local authorities' perspective, we've received the letter and we've received the slides, and I think at a South West London level, Jed, the Chief of Merton's responding for South West London boroughs. I just wanted to flag here, actually, that the Cabinet Member for Children's and Adults would like us to send a sovereign, like a Richmond sovereign response to you, but that we really welcome being engaged in the discussion and the consideration of the plans going forward, and how, I suppose, matching it from what we're doing now, successful stuff we're doing now, how we can build on that going forward. But that our Richmond itself would like to send in some sovereign responses.
So we would welcome that, and I think that it's really important, you know, that from our perspective, I think in South West London, when we refreshed our STP, we took the decision that it was going to be locally led, it was going to be about the local health and care plans, and we want to do the same thing with this. And in some parts nationally of the NHS, it's a much more top-down approach, and I think South West London, we think there's real potential for us to do this together in a way that makes sense, which is why it's called Moving Forward Together. And I think that we would welcome your comments, positive and, you know, opportunities for improvement on that, how we go as we go forward. And I know that Tonya, I think, is arranging a workshop to think about what place delegation might look like, and it's how we take that forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know most people are in the committee on the board are familiar with this because we've been discussing it for a little while. It is developing at pace, and so we look forward to the next instalment. I'm sure we'll see a few more versions before we're through.
Sorry, just to say, we did have the discussion with membership at the last meeting, so we've had quite an in-depth. So if governing body members are aware, we had quite an in-depth discussion at the last membership meeting and went through a similar slide pack with them, so they're fully up to speed as well now. So, and we'll go back again at our network and membership meeting.
Very good.
And they endorsed the direction of travel.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so is there any other comments? No? In that case, let's move forward. Fergus, are you taking the medicines optimisation priorities piece? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to remember to turn my light off when I'm finished after this item too. So this is for the governing body to note. This is a piece of work that Emma Richmond, our chief pharmacist, pulled together, I think, sort of over the last summer towards the October-November period. And when she presented this to the senior management team, we thought it would be really helpful to share with the wider governing body just for information. Medicines Optimisation are a group of staff who are almost our largest group of staff. When you look at them as a group of professionals, our pharmacists are a significant group of CCG employees. And the medicines budget itself comes close to 10% of what we spend is just on primary care prescribing. So it's important that we have good oversight and good management of that. And I really would want to applaud Emma's excellent work in pulling together what is a comprehensive strategy and work programme for our medicines optimisation team, who have come together over the last 12 to 18 months as part of our local delivery unit. Emma's work has been shared with the wider South West London chief pharmacists, and indeed I understand from her that the other chief pharmacists are thinking very much along the lines of developing a similar programme of work. So it's here for information, just to note, and to thank Emma and the team for the work that they have done over the last 12 months for our medicines management team.
Excellent, thank you. It is noted in the paper where Richmond stands in terms of its national ranking as number one. So particular credit, I think, to the team for this achievement. Any questions or comments for Fergus on this? Excellent piece of work, I think, by Emma and the team. Thank you. No questions? Excellent. Right, well, we have included in the pack the Board Assurance Framework Summary and the Committee in Common minutes, and also the reference. So they're just there for information. We're not going to go through those in any way. It's just to note the date of the next meeting, 2nd of July, and it will be here again in York House. And that is the end of the formal part of the meeting. And now it's open for public question time. So are there any